Julie Rayzor, Chapter 15, read by Tamsen Howes. As most of you probably know, Captain Winters said from his leather chair at the head of the conference room table, "We've got radio comm with Tinker. The Zoms are working with the Scabs. I'll have more for you later on that. Lieutenant Kowalski won't be joining us. As for the rescue, Lopez, Rayzor, tell us what happened." Winters seemed older, grayer and tenser instead of what I had expected, relieved at finally regaining some control over the situation. Radio communications being restored, missing men returned, contact with HQ. It seemed that he knew of the unexpected bad news coming our way, although we would have to wait to find out about it. Over a dozen of us were gathered at the table. Captain Winters, his second-in-command, Captain Hansen, who was a grounded Black Hawk helicopter pilot, 3 or 4 lieutenants and their sergeants, Dr. Scarborough, Felix Vinson, Corporals Gary Lopez and Jim Barnett, seated on either side of me, and Jill. Along the table sat Privates Slim Johnson, Jesus Escobar, John Wilcox, and Samuel Connors, who spotted a bandaged leg under his cut-up pair of fatigues. Slim sat like a rock, unmoving and unswayed by the discussion. Wilcox smirked, as he always did. Conspicuously absent was Lieutenant Kowalski, as Winters had mentioned. Someone told me they were treating Kowalski for post-traumatic stress disorder. I hoped he would be okay. Connors sat down the table for me, and I spied him fiddling with the giant slice in his fatigue pants. When he saw me watching, I smiled and pulled on my own pant leg. He shrugged and almost laughed as he fingered the slice in his trousers. "What happened out there last night?" Winters said again. "Tell everything for the group. Let's get everyone on the same page." Lopez and I alternated back and forth, telling of our missions to the skyscraper and to the airport. Jill, Wilcox, Connors, and Escobar nodded at various times, but didn't interrupt. We shared all details, including finding the barricaded streets, the zombie showers, the toilet rooms, the laundry room, and the deli kitchen. Winter's lips turned down and stayed that way throughout the whole story. He'd heard half of it before. I wondered if he was picking out discrepancies in our tale, and he seemed angry. When we finished, he said, "We're interrogating the 2 prisoners. I expect them to confirm what you've said about the refinery and what Tinker has reported, that the zombies are working with the Scabs. We all need to know what happened to Lieutenant Colonel Grierson. Jim?" Jim pushed back his chair and stood. He had showered and shaved and changed his clothes since I'd left him in the hospital room. His cuts and scrapes were cleaned and bandaged. "We left here and went straight down the highway towards Oklahoma City. It was odd, but the highway was clear of vehicles. Normally the Scabs block the roads just enough to annoy us or draw us out of the vehicle. Sometimes they trade, and other times they try to kill us. We usually cut them apart. This time we went 50 miles with no resistance. Then we found out why. Somewhere near the Stroud they were waiting for us. Not Scabs. Zombies. Cars were lined up on both sides of the highway. It was like we were being funneled into a trap, and that's exactly what happened. The lanes were straight at first to draw us in. Then the drivers had to twist and turn to get the Humvees around dead cars and trucks. That slowed us to a crawl. Then we dead-ended. It was a perfect trap. The Humvees were blocked in. There was no going forward, right, or left. Tractor-trailer trucks blocked us on both sides. The drivers of the Humvees didn't know what was going on with the first. The driver of the last Humvee didn't know what was going on with the first because radios were jammed, and they didn't think to back up until too late. I was in the middle Humvee. Snipers, probably leaders, killed the drivers. Zombies came in from every direction, above, from atop the trailer trucks, and from underneath them, and from all sides. Every man in my squad was killed. I was captured when I ran out of ammunition. When my gun ran dry, they stopped attacking. The zombies just stood there, swaying and moaning. As soon as we stopped fighting, they stopped fighting. Then the leaders came with guns and took me prisoner along with Johnson, Hirano, and Kowalski. We were the only 4 left that hadn't been dragged off or killed. We were taken into town. Stroud, maybe. Then we were packed into a train car, or a container car. They kept us there for a day after taking Hirano away and before moving the car to the oil refinery. Only Hirano was left behind, and I don't know why. The container car was filled with food, so we gorged ourselves. There was nothing else to do. We had a feast. We figured out later that we were being traded to the Scabs for diesel fuel. After the trade, the Scabs were so angry we had eaten so much of their food that they refused to feed us. We refused to work. They beat us. We fought back. They threatened to kill us. It didn't matter. We were strong. No zombies attacked the scabs, not even once. They were trading partners, and the zombs left 3 or 4 leaders behind at the refinery to help with the technology, probably to improve the quality. I know only what we overheard the scabs talking about, and that wasn't very much. I do know that they've got electricity for the computer systems. They've hacked the logins, probably with the help of the zombie leaders. They didn't know what to do with us because we wouldn't work for them. After a couple of days of beatings didn't work, they blindfolded us and took us in the back of the truck to the fallout shelter. We didn't even know we were at the airport. They untied us only one at a time so we could eat and take a leak. Then the lights go out, and Escobar and Wilcox come through the door. When Jim finished talking, he sat down, and Captain Winters stood up from his chair and paced the room. He walked in a big circle around the table, forcing everyone to watch him, commanding them with his presence and taking control of his audience. You all know that the Army ammunition plant in McAllister exploded 6 months ago, so there is no more ammo coming. Fort Sill and Fort Riley fell at the beginning of all of this mess, and I just learned that the Armored Division at Fort Gibson was overrun with zombies 2 weeks ago. We've got a few of these guys who made it here with a tank. I told you earlier that we got word from Tinker Air Force Base. It's not good news. As you reported, the scab prisoners confirmed the zombies have been working with the outlaws to bring down the military. They have arranged meetings, and we have been engaged in trading some supplies and food and weapons. We knew right away when the radio jammer was destroyed, and I've been talking to HQ all night. Oklahoma Area Command has been spreading for a month that zombs are making plans. They couldn't confirm their suspicions, so they passed it off as nothing until 2 weeks ago. Winters paused to pivot on his heel and walk the other direction. 2 weeks ago, their night patrols started disappearing. They would go out and not return. The next night, more patrols would be sent out to search for them, and they found nothing. No Humvees, no bodies, no zombs, and no scabs. Occasionally, one of those rescue missions would disappear. A few times, the patrol reported the attack before they were wiped out. They think the zombies are swarming. They started daylight search and rescue missions, sending up helicopters to find their men. Whatever the attacks occurred, they don't know where. The zombs must have hidden the vehicles and concealed the dead, even their own dead. This much I've learned since then. Command was concerned with the attacks, but they didn't share their concern until now. Then the radios went dead, and we all know why that happened. Tinker sent up helicopters to take out every radio antenna in Oklahoma City, and they've got the right one. They have been in touch with the Pentagon, and they've been trying to reach us until last night. Do we know if the missing controls are attacked by zombs? Jim asked. They suspect it. Scavengers have never successfully attacked our guys. They're too disorganized. And that brings me to the point of this meeting. The zombies have launched a massive, organized attack on Tinker. Everyone in the room sat deathly still. They are still under attack. They are holding, but they are reporting that thousands of zombies have breached the wire, maybe tens of thousands. Our guys are holed up in the buildings. Food and ammo have run low or out. Some of them are using their rifles as clubs to fight them off. The zombies attack each night and retreat into the city at the break of day. We all know that they normally attack during the day. Winters paused. They're getting smarter, I said. My face flushed red with embarrassment as if I had spoken out of turn. I hadn't meant to say anything. Winters and several others nodded and waited as if they expected me to say more. I continued. They attack at night. They never did that before, I shrugged. My embarrassment ebbed. They're using weapons to signal their leaders of our movements. They've taken to throwing telephone poles from roofs, barricading streets. They set up a food kitchen by 6th Street with showers, bathrooms, and a laundry room. They're building and constructing. The leaders are learning and teaching the zomb. They're using their telepathy to instruct zombies in routine tasks like eating meals and washing clothing. They're building a new civilization for themselves. Several people in the room scoffed. I grew frustrated. My head ached. My sinuses were stuffed. I blew my nose into a tissue in front of everyone and found myself even more embarrassed than before. I didn't believe it at first either, I continued. I'd never have thought that a year ago. They've mutated the virus so that it can infect dogs when our people can't even isolate the virus. Never mind find a cure or a vaccine. They're making deals with the scabs. Thank you, Rayzor, Winters broke in. At Tinker, the scabs are surrounding the base during the day. They are cooperating with the Zoms. They fire upon troops who try to leave the base. Command set up helicopters to rout them out. They disappeared into holes surrounded by massive piles of cars blocking the roads. When the helicopters leave, they come back. They have asked us to mount a rescue. They've considered evacuation. But they don't have enough fuel to truck out 1,000 troops and civilians, and on foot they don't stand a chance. I thought about my infection, growing depressed, but hiding my feelings. What about food and water? Hansen asked. I could see his thoughts churning behind blue eyes. They have food and water, little ammo, little gas. We need to go now, Wilcox said. Yes, we need to bring everyone we have, every man, woman, and child old enough to hold a gun. But we don't have enough gasoline, which is where the refinery comes in, Winters said. He proceeded to lay out a plan to take the refinery away from the scabs. He assigned his lieutenants tasks such as securing and up-armoring cargo trucks and converting them to... Let me try that again. He assigned his lieutenants tasks such as securing and up-armoring cargo trucks and converting them to gun platforms for a push to Oklahoma City. We were to empty the entire armory down to the last round of diminutive .22 caliber rimfire ammo. He spoke in detail for over an hour. One more thing, Winters finally said as the meeting came to an end. Johnson, you just made corporal. Lopez, Barnett, you're both promoted to sergeant, effective immediately. Someone started clapping, and seconds later everyone in the room joined in. Lopez, Jim, and Johnson shook hands. Jim's arm went around my shoulder in a hug, and Lopez hugged Jill. Winters eyed the two of them closely. The meeting was dismissed. Everyone had orders. Jill and I were directed to prepare medical kits. Jim stood by my chair when I got up. He took my hand as we left the room. I was distracted. I couldn't let him kiss me. We walked to the end of the long hallway, and I went with him, absent-mindedly following along. How are you doing? Damn it. Let me try that again. How you doing? He said with a fake New York accent. I laughed to make him happy, while inside I felt miserable. Physically from my infection with the zombie virus, emotionally with the foreboding knowledge of my fate, and I worried that Jim might become infected. I was being a coward. I had long planned to kill myself if I had ever become infected. I'd jump from a building or put a gun to my head. I wouldn't be like all the others who develop the symptoms and silently hide a fact of life and of death from those who could kill them if they knew, when they knew. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't flow. It would be so much easier to let the stress out. A good ball would surely help, but for some weird reason I couldn't do it. My heart was hardening. My fate was sealing itself. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The time to scream would come later. The time to scream when locked in the hospital room. The time to scream when I went blind. The time to scream in front of the firing squad or locked outside of the hospital when the zombies came to lead me away to make me one of them. Until someone noticed the symptoms, victims always stayed silent. I chose silence. I was a coward. You're awfully quiet, Jim noticed. Nothing to say, I shrugged. Let's go up to the roof. We've got some time. We don't leave until after midnight. He led the way to the stairs. I wondered if I should leap from the roof. I wondered if I should shoot myself. I wondered if Jim would kill me when I asked him to, if I told him why. We reached the roof and walked the length of the building to the vegetable gardens. The gardens were huge, built months ago by men carrying dirt up from the lawns. They constructed wooden boxes in long rows. It was not nearly big enough to feed hundreds of people in the hospital, but it served as a victory garden, where people could plant what they liked, tend to a plot, and take their minds off their worries for a little while. The food and flowers produced were often bartered for goods the hunters and patrols brought back. Old magazines, batteries, clothing, anything and everything. The snipers had gone to prepare for the attack on the refinery. Only 2 guards patrolled at opposite ends of the rooftop, watching for zombies. I looked out over the city towards the southeast. Just a couple of days before, I'd been longing for Jim's return. I'd been there in the tallest tower fighting zombies, protecting Jill, protecting Connors after he was shot, and finding a solution to radio jamming. To the east was the airport where we'd found Jim and the others. Beyond that, but southwards was Broken Arrow, where Jill and I grew up.